Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of the ASHA, that is Aligarh Society of History and Archaeology and Ganga Jamni Joint Series. Today, we have with us yet another senior historian, Professor Venkata Subramanian, who taught at the Department of History, University of Delhi, till a few years ago. He served there in various capacities, including that of the head of the department as well as the coordinator of the Center for Advanced Study. He also once served as the member secretary of ICHR, as well as he was the Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences at the Delhi University. His field of interests span over history of South India with a focus on Vijayanagar Empire and music. He is the author of around half a dozen books, including Music as History in Tamil Nadu. Another book, Tradition and Transmission of Percussion Art in 20th Century, is in the offing and is expected to come soon. He has also written a book for the Central Industrial Security Force Home Ministry, which requested him to write the history of the force on the occasion of the Golden Jubilee in 2019. And this book was released by the PM himself on 10th March 2019. But more than that, Venkat sir is also a performing artist himself who is much sought after. He keeps giving live shows as well. Welcome, sir, to our program. We are very thankful to you that you agreed to give us some of your precious time. Today, Venkat sir will speak to us on the topic Formation of a Regional Tradition, the Case of Tamil Music. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Rezavi, for the kind words. I apologize for the delay of maybe 10 minutes. And also, I request you that since this is an uncharted or less familiar territory, I may sound a little reminiscential, nostalgic, and I don't know whether I'm clear that I'm going to speak as a music historian today, not as a musician. And let me make it very clear at the outset. I want to be a little more frank. That's why I said reminiscential, because I was going through an uneasy 90s. So I have to explain, that I was getting little disillusioned about the way we were teaching history. And then we were not able to bring in culture at all into our syllabus. And even if we brought in culture, that was more Indology than an interpretative culture. And today I'm going to adopt a method taking from our MPhil classes, that and how a Delhi University MPhil class would have been, or how a student wants to work on a particular topic which is not familiar, how we orient them. Maybe I will try to relive the 90s a little bit. So I may be little unconventional in my approach to today's topic. I have given the topic as formation of a sub-regional music tradition. I think I would like to fine-tune it further. It is not to be confused with regions in history, those kind of this thing. I look at it from a pan-Indian music, and then South Indian music, and within that, the Tamil music. So I would like to rather use a sub-regional idiom for that, number one. Number two, even within Tamil Nadu, until the Vijayanagar, you have to take into account the dynamics of the development of music as Tamil tradition, then as Telugu tradition, and under Vijayanagar, the Telugu, then the Marathi, a little bit of Deccan, and also the Karnataka region, everything came in. And as Catherine Asher, if you see that, but I have been talking about it also, for the first time in a textbook, there is a very clear kind of a statement of cultural orientation of the empire. If you look at it, when it comes to Vijayanagar, there's a very clear statement, cultural orientation. And Eaton has developed it further by giving another title, Political and Cultural Evolution at Vijayanagara. So it has got a meaning. So in a way, as a person who has taught for more than 40 years, I see it as a paradigm shift from political economy to political culture. Anyhow, that is a larger issue of pedagogy, which we can talk as political economy to political culture. But today's talk is the approach of a historian to a sub-regional, how we can use the musical material which is there in Tamil literary tradition, which I am going to say that this is the bedrock of the Tamil formation or the Tamil formation of Tamil music. Like you talk about a religious tradition, Champak Lakshmi has written on religious tradition, where the influences came from north. And then it came not at one go. It was coming. It's coming through several channels. But the tradition that I'm going to talk about today is the indigenous Tamil tradition culled out from the literary tradition. So I would like to look at it as a historian, how I shifted. That's one. But before that, I think we had a talk. My connection, I want to be a little nostalgic and personal here. I have a very strong connect with the AMU. I think all of you know. In fact, I became a member of the Indian History Congress, ordinary member in 1975, which I could not attend because I was submitting my thesis. So I attended my first Congress in Calicut in 1976. So that is the time I met all the friends. Then once I joined Delhi University in 84, 85 to 2010, I have been a very frequent visitor to Aligarh. I think Professor Razavi would have seen me off in the evening at least more than 30, 40 times. And to just give you an idea about the kind of connect that we have. And I don't want to go further into that, but I wanted to give this talk to Karwan. I actually promised Ishan first on this talk on music. I will talk there. But I would like to bring in my connect on this topic with Aligarh. That is why I said, okay, let me give this here. Because my last visit to Aligarh, official visit, personal visit was Kesavan Son's research. I have come a couple of times. 3rd August 2010 to deliver Professor Nurul Hasan Memorial Lecture. And people who attended the lecture might remember the title. And then subsequently, it was published in Sangeet Nataka Academy also. That is titled is Interdisciplinarity, Music, History, and the Tamils. I think probably copies must be available in the department. Sangeet Natak, volume 54, number 4, 2010. The secretary heard about it, and then the editor came and took the paper and published it. So it is now nearly 11 years. I'm very happy to see a lot of discussion taking place on music, and particularly our friend from, I think, Wilson, which college? King's College. King's College London has a very strong department, and they reviewed my book also. Another colleague, he reviewed my book. So here I want to become a little more personal, because how to convey this shift in interest, and then a kind of to have a flight on uncharted territory. I want to be a little more personal here. How do I put it? I will say personally, 1995-96 onwards, I was really feeling uneasy. I would like to call it uneasy 90s. Something different is happening and I am not tuned to the times. So that's the kind of a feeling I had. And so to bring out that feeling, I would use certain key books which influenced me. I think that's a better way of conveying the shift in interest and then the books which made me think. Let me put it that way. One of my cousins who's in States, he sent me a book in 1997. The title of the book is University in Ruins. Almost it has been echoing my feeling that I am not doing something which is not up to the times, and I am at least lagging behind by about 10, 20 years in my understanding of history. Something is happening. It is not postmodernism yet, although my senior colleague Sumit Sarkar delivered a lecture in St. Stephen's College way back in 1998, Postmodernism and History Writing. You might recall that he was the first person to also say social history, problems and possibilities in the 84 Indian History Congress, Modern India Sectional President's Address. The same Professor Sarkar gave a lecture in Stephen's College in 1998. Now, this is what I am saying. This is the MPhil classes that we had. This is the benefit that all of us had from our senior colleagues. Earlier, it was Parthasarathi Gupta on political economy, and now social history and culture, it is Professor Sumit Sarkar. Anyhow, these books will convey how it shaped. The author of this book is one Bill Readings. You may ask why somebody is saying university in ruins, which I myself realized it as a dean. Some of my senior colleagues may take exception also. He uses a very interesting expression. Interdisciplinary practices have resulted in epistemological anarchy. I don't want to elaborate on that, but I will try to simplify, because since students are also listening, they must know what it means. So I realized it fully when I was a dean, and also the person who has been scanning the proposals from different disciplines. From economics to commerce, from commerce to management, topics are the same. Titles are the same. Or in other words, what I'm trying to convey is, the mother discipline is economics. These practices did not pay back the mother discipline. It was producing knowledge, but more in what is called, or this gentleman, he called it as quasi-disciplines. They are not fully developed disciplines. So interdisciplinary practice, then he's talking about cultural studies, which was relevant and we were discussing it in MPhil classes. And he'll define an undiscriminating interdisciplinarity. So that is the title which I gave for Nurul's lecture. This level, in a 1 hour lecture, it is very difficult to convey, but I am only presenting the concerns. We will have a detailed discussion later. The second one, a little later, is what, and on that, I also read another work on interdisciplinarity that I don't want to bring in at this stage. Anyhow, what is interdisciplinarity needs an explanation for students. The knowledge in the new millennium that is produced, it should be relevant to more than one discipline. In simple terms, this is what it means. And students from literature, they will appreciate it much better And because it also raises the basic debate of the relationship between literature and history. You can take it up to head and white and those kinds of things, which is not at this stage is not there. So then the second book which made me think was Eric Hobsbawm's Interesting Times, that many people would have read. What people would not have read was The Fractured Times. It is only the cultural historians who would read this. Otherwise, it would not have come to the notice, or nor they would have been interested in that. Fractured Times, it is not Interesting Times, it is Fractured Times. Few papers were coming, but the book actually came out in 2013. The ideas were coming and it was being published in journals. And culture and society in 20th century. Nobody else, as a serious historian, such a prolific writer. He calls it a Fractured Times and also society, culture and society in the 20th century. He raises 4 or 5 very important questions. That uneasiness that I was telling, answer I got in this book. Where are the arts going? There is a chapter. Those who are interested, now they can pick up that. First chapter is, where are the arts going? A century of cultural symbiosis. Why hold festivals in 21st century? These are all the chapters. Politics and culture in the new millennium. And then the last one says it all, from art to myth. From art to myth. American Cowboy as an international myth. This is his own chapter. So the question which arose in me as a practitioner of music, why all these things have not come into the art form music? That is the question. And already people who are familiar with cultural history of 20th century must have heard this expression, avant-garde. Avant-garde. So it is the visual arts which first did it, and also music, they did it. So what I want to convey here is the failure of the avant-garde composers raised a very important question about the nature of music. What does music mean? So once again, if you look into the old cultures, Chinese civilization, which is the oldest, and Indian civilization, which is the oldest, has some kind of scope for mathematical and acoustic properties of music. See, whenever we say Indian music, it is produced by the mind but touches the soul. That is how it is explained. The Indian sound, maybe it is the property of the sound. It's not just the Indian music. Any music would do that. So mathematical and acoustic properties, Chinese and Indian, we say that it is aesthetic in a certain sense, it is intellectual in certain sense, and it is also spiritual in a certain sense. It is in this that during the Vijayanagara period, you have the Purandaradasa, Dasakuta, and all that, which comes as a kind of a vision written by J. Jackson. Those who are interested, you can see Visions of the Empire. You can read that. But the idea that I'm conveying here is, Greece had a thoroughly mathematical approach, thanks to Pythagoras. The Pythagorean approach, mathematics and sound. See, we are talking about measurement of microtonal intervals. So that was made possible by Greece. And medieval religious thinkers, they used it for moral education. Although musically, say Gregorian chants were converted into composed music. I'll come back to that a little later. I was happy to see Nadeem Saab using visual sources. So all this led me to understand the change in the first decade. As a preliminary, I'm giving all these things. So then the age-old question of whether music is an art or science, that was also discussed. Then within the Marxism school, It is the Frankfurt School which took the lead. People might be familiar. Benjamin, Theodor Adorno, Horkheimer. See, again, for the first time, a textbook uses the expression cultural production. Have you been using cultural production? I think Eaton has a chapter on cultural production in gunpowder age. Tell me any other person who has used this. Where did it come from? It came from Adorno, because music which was in the private sphere now enters market relations. Cultural production, cultural reproduction, and all that. So I only jokingly tell, when you talk about technology and culture in music, the values have changed. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheswara is the original statement. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Tepo Maheswara was the first stage. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru CDO Maheswara was the second stage. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru MP3O Maheswara was the third stage. Little bit of Sakshatkar came through Skype. I mean, these are things which actually goes in our mind. So to learn music from tape, the level of the student has to be very high. It is like learning music from an 85-year-old man. He can only convey the idea in his voice. The student should have the level done at whatsoever it is. So the level of the student has to be very, very high. Anyhow, popular culture, what music, whether music has a meaning. What is the difference between music and language? All these debates came back again at the philosophical level, thanks to the post-industrial society kind of a situation. It is here, I read another book, 1998, Alex Coles and Alexia Defert edited Anxiety of Interdisciplinarity. I mean, I started reading a little more on interdisciplinarity. I'll just be very brief. Relations. See, you may be wondering why I'm giving so much of preamble. It is not a familiar territory. I think somewhere, somehow, I must bring out the seriousness. That is why I seek your indulgence. If I take a little more time and if it is a little heavy, I'm prepared to answer everything in the question-answer session. Please make a note, because this has given me, Aligarh has once again given me the opportunity to think and react. Relations, it raises the basic question. It is here that I got interested. What is the relationship between art and society? Until that point, I was using Arnold Hauser. I mean, those people should be knowing. It is not relevant anymore, which means old ways of looking at the world were inadequate. That is the realization. The old ways of looking at the world were inadequate and new ways have to be found. Avant-garde has failed. And it got demonstrated very much in the visual arts. They were demonstrating it much more. It was a double failure. One failure was failure of modernity and failure to express the times. Art, for the first time, failed to express the times. And this made me another this thing to go beyond the text kind of thing. You know, our study of history, particularly art history, and I have had discussions with Kapilaji also at that time. And again, older thinkers, you know, they were not prepared to accept the change because India has not experienced that. It is being experienced by a post-industrial society. That is the problem. But it comes into our society in certain areas. See, it comes through, say, postmodernism. It comes through literature. It will come in feminism. It will come in Dalit literature. More it comes in literature rather than art. So the realization that I had was the failure of modernity and the double failure, and impact on history is the need to go beyond the text. I will explain it simply like this, how it changed. One has to see the difference between document and documentary. Even yesterday, there was a release on colonial diseases. You know, my friend Suranjan has put a compendium. So it was released by Primus. So documents, the public health documents, how it was handled, plague, malaria, etc. So for a historian, for the first time, we had to grapple with the difference between a document and a documentary. Then subjectivity and intersubjectivity. In art, that automatically comes in with this change. So three kinds of subjectivity for the first time came to be discussed in every art. It is that of an artist, it is a work, and you have a viewer. All three. So how do you explain intersubjectivity here? But in the Indian situation, we have everybody rolled into one. The singer, he is the lyricist, he is also the musician, he also sings. So you have a total difference between the Western situation and the Indian situation. And then even when it comes to question of presentation of the art, what happens is that is composed music. I'll come back to that a little. Sound is composed. In India, it is, they hit at the note. See, Gregorian chants with the invention of piano became Mozart, those kind of composed music. So there you hit at the note. In India and China, you negotiate the note. You are not hitting the note. Even in the presentation, I understood these kind of differences. So whether it is a text or anything, creator, created, audience, it comes into all our discussions. Then comes the next question of history: truth, veracity, and authenticity of source. So you have to put oral history also into this. Which one is veracity of the source? There is a lot of information. Information is there in everything. But ask Professor Karashima, which I am going to speak next, he will swear by inscription. Whatever has whispered in his ears, he will ignore the shouts. Sanjay, so, I mean, one is free. It's not right or wrong. The veracity. So the truth, veracity, all these things comes back. So with that, what happened is history beyond the text became a reality. This I want to convey to the younger students who are coming to history. So that day, Ishan also put me this question, but there was no time that day to explain. I thought I will do it. Some of the questions which are put, I thought that I will explain this through this. So now we started using imaging and imagining. If you find when you go for art history, you will find the expression imaging and imagining. Why is it so? Fine art, the creative image. Cartoon, image as critic. Photograph, still image. Film and television, moving image. Music, composed sound. Image as sound. I was very happy to see Irfan Saab referring to it in this NBT book. So far, it is not Professor Thapar. You can't find a single book on music because that doesn't warrant the way thought process. You cannot expect Sharmaji to do it. Satish Saab will be an old Indologist type description, Kamsen and all that will be there, not interpreted. Irfan Saab was the first person who refers to, I think, Bonnie Wade in that NBT. Only reference is that too in Nach parties in the court of Jahangir and all that. Anyhow, that is not my this thing here. But music as composed sound, image as sound. That is what is to be understood here. Then oral history. It is sound of memory. So does it give a scope for asking a definition of history into what do you call history is memory made scientific? It has come to stay. It has come to stay. Oral history has come to stay. Then internet, virtual space. And then cultural historians these days use a lot of landscape. If this is a virtual space, now landscape is configured space. It is a very important historical, and if you have a configured space, naturally the interdisciplinary practice becomes historical ecology. I gave this topic to for an MPhil student, historical ecology of Malabar. She is Meenakshi Menon, who is teaching in Canada. So as and when I was getting this, I have assigned some of these topics and my students tried to do some justice. So configured space, architecture, the built object, material culture, the object. This is the kind of history that came to be practiced in the beginning of the 21st century. Now I come to my field. I mean, what I wanted to do. The two disciplines I'm familiar, rather, I don't want to claim any expertise, is music and history. Let me apply this principle of interdisciplinarity. Then I went into the kind of research output in music. And what I found was the kind of expressions used. Most of them were in Hindi, those were produced from North. One expression that I found suitable for music, or the way that they have looked at it, Anusandhan, Anveshan, Jignasa, Vicharana, Samsodhan. It is not anywhere like inquiry, historia. The way it doesn't come very near about historical approach at all. So if you roughly translate all that in English, to go back, to go about, to go around, explore again, that is the kind of thing that has been doing. So which made me realize there are only three aspects which are possible here. One is the musical aspect. What is swar, what is dhvani, that is there. According to treatises, etc., people have been explaining. The second is performance related, music related. And the third, about music. There, philosophers have taken more interest there. Rather, philosophers, sociologists, that otherwise you wouldn't have had this ethnomusicology, the music of Santals and all that. The sociologists have taken interest. So other disciplines have started looking at it. How can a historian, from a historical point of view, look at music? I try to narrow down my interest. Chronology oriented, music of raga and tala, Indian ways of perceiving, processing and evaluating phenomena, part of larger performing culture, and neglect of work done in regional languages. All these things came to my mind, or I collected information. So now at this stage, I thought, did anyone approach music from point of view of history? Couple of people have made serious attempt, because if I give you their chapterization, you will have a feel of what meant history of music to them, or what they thought was history of music. So now I must tell you, my father did a senior fellowship under this ICHR in the late 80s, Carnatic music and the Tamils. So now I am actually entering into the background of today's talk. I am going to give you 4 examples of what people thought as history of music, how they approached. So that will probably give you a feel. The first one was Swami Prajnananda. I don't know how many in the audience, because we do not know the audience, or even from a music department, how many people would have read it. That is left to them. There are few people who must have done it also. And I found some very interesting things. Swami Prajnananda's first book, being a Swami, his introduction is succeeded by the foreword. Because the primacy was given to him. So I have that book. I think I mentioned it elsewhere also. So Swami Pragyananda, 1964, he looked at it from the pan-Indian point of view, chronology-oriented kind of approach. So first chapter, it says historical study. And naturally, the Vedic music and Gandharva music. So that is the next this thing. Third, he goes into Naradiya Siksha and Natya Sastra as text. So what comes into the reckoning, understanding, that's what it is. For that I am giving. Jatis as described in Natya Shastra, ancient musical instruments of India, orchestra and chorus in ancient India, then 7-stringed veena, which is, it became pan-Indian because I find it in the inscription at Kudimyamalai also. Sapta Tantri veena. Sambamurti interpreted it. You get it in the Buddhist caves of Pitalkora first. Then the concept of raga, which is peculiar to India. No other music has the concept of raga. Then, being the time 50s, 60s, Aryan elements, non-Aryan elements. So this is how that chapter is also brought in here. Then origin and development of Dhruvapada with reference to Bengal, because Swami Pragyananda is from Calcutta. Evolution of Kayal and the development of Gharanas. Short analysis of music of Bengal. A short survey of dances. Acoustics of Indian music. Iconography of Indian music. Aesthetic and psychological aspects of music. Philosophy of music. Prime object and ideal of Indian music. You see, the concerns, you can have a feel what exactly he calls it, history of Indian music, and these are all the chapters. This is for you the pan-Indian. But in the what happened after that is, from the pan-Indian point of view, about 15 texts have become assumed importance musically. Of course, Vedas, Shruti, Smriti, those things we can start with. Natya Shastra. It was first edited by Fitz Edward Hall, 1865. It underwent many editions. Then Dattilam by Dattila. So Travancore Sanskrit series. Brihadesi, Matanga, which is assignable to 8th, 9th century AD. Abhinaya Darpana of Nandikeshwara. Bharat Vashyam of Nanya Bhupala. Manasa Ullasa. I will come back to that a little later when I came to take the parallel development in Chalukyas. Sangeeta Ratnakara, it is a landmark. 1210 to 1247, 13. So Amir Khusro and Sarangadeva, they are very important, and 13th century is important for that divide, music literature and musicological literature. After that, you are going to get musicological literature. So the 7 chapters of Sangeeta Ratnakara clearly Swar, Rag, Prakirna, Prabandha, Tala, Vadya, Nritya. Now these chapters get repeated in other texts. Then Sangeeta Samesara of Parshvanatha, 1300. Then Nurul Hasan Saab gave me a copy of Gunyatul Munya. When I met him, when he came to know, when Uttaranchal connection, somebody told that I'm interested in music and all. So he gave me a copy of 1375, and Ansari Saab has edited, I think, of Shamsuddin. Ibrahim Hazan Abu Raja, Gujarat, to educate the taste of the elite. It is here that Dawood Ali is talking about the courtly culture of the earlier period. So these are all meant for creating the taste for the elite. So the chapters of Catherine Asher, of elites and their culture, there is a separate chapter. This is how a teacher has to relate the paradigm shifts and then try to look for kind of information. I think people can correct me, and as per Nurul Hasan Saab, earliest known Persian work on Indian music is Gunyatul Munya. We don't have any other Persian work before that. That's what I was told. Then Sangeeta Suryodaya, Sangeeta Raja, Swaramela Kalanidhi, Chadurdandi Prakashika, All these things are there. So there is the text music department started using. That is what I wanted to convey here. Then this is about Pan India. Then about South Indian music, there is a book published in 1972 by one R. Rangaramanuja Iyengar, which has the title History of South Indian Music from Vedic Times to the Present. So they thought they are treating history like that. Origin of music, Nadopasana, Indian music scales, 1, 2, Natya Shastra. So it is a mix of aspects of music, properties of music, plus technical aspects of music, plus textual study. So that is how it came. I don't want to go into details because of the limited time. It take care of the South Indian aspect, and about 27 chapters are there. Okay. Then comes the first one, which tuned me into this work, is when I assisted my father. I benefited on at 3 levels. One, my understanding of Sangam literature from polity and society was shifted to music in this. Now I started collecting for where all this music part is there, because I assisted, and then discussions, etc. So we decided, both of us, we decided that let us try to give it a try of sub-regional music. So this is the idea. Age of Sangam, what are all the information available on music on Sangam, which I'm going to talk about a little while from now. Then Silappatikaram as a very important text. Age of Pallavas, you have inscription, major inscription on which I have explained what are all the things, how to understand. Then hymnal period, it is full, it's singing the praise of God. That means songs are there. Then the age of imperial Cholas. Today I will only talk up to that because I won't have time to go into the Vijayanagara period. Then Thevaram to Tiruppugal, after that you are getting the text. Coming to the modern period, there is absolutely no problem. So I have given you 3 examples: Pan-Indian, South Indian, Tamil. Now there is a general book, and I also happened to meet him in 1991 when he was submitting the thesis. Music, because of its properties, can be perceived differently also. This is how I'm referring to Louis Rowell. His thesis is on music and musical thought in early India. He submitted it in Chicago in 92. Munshiram got the rights and published it in 98. So to come into the Indian market, it took nearly 6 years. But I was with Norman Cutler for 4 months in 1991 when I was on that is the opportunity I had. I went on a music tour. Monday to Friday, I was in Chicago with Norman Cutler. Saturday, Sunday, we were having concerts with Professor T.R. Subramaniam of the music department. So I had the base at Chicago, 5 days in Chicago Library and Cutler. So I met Rowell for the first time. So this is the musicology part. Music and musical thought in early India. Thought. Where does it come from? Philosophy of music. Then focus on the phenomena, sound, causal, nada, akasa, chant, naradiya stiksha, pitch, theater, narthasastra, rasa, sastra, pitch, time, form, song, style. Now, this is the scope. Why I gave these 4 examples is, this is the scope that you have for studying music. You can choose whichever way. If a person with a physics background can very well study the properties of sound. Anyway, in any case, so when it comes to music, one more book I thought I must mention, which changed my very perception of history of music. That book, I think I have mentioned in detail in the Professor Nurul Hasan, this thing on section 3, it is not history of music. The title is music history. You see carefully, there is a difference between the two. Then I fine-tuned it into music as history, because as a historian, I made music as an object of his study, generated information, reconfigured the information in my own way. As I did CISF. CISF as an object, generate information, data, then you reconfigure that to make a kind of a narrative. So Karl Dahlows wrote a book called Foundations of Music History in German. Then it was translated by Robinson. So all this comes from the phenomenology of mind of Hegel, from the philosophy kind of a thing. I don't want to go into details here, but now I come to my book. My book which I have written. So I started thinking aloud on how to go about the material that I have already familiar with. So my friends, you might recall, that's why the Aligarh Connection and History Congress, I want to say, my first paper was 1998, where I was not able to, what I wanted to do in ICHR, I was not able to do. I was only reading and reading on history, music only. So the first paper, IHC 98, Rational and Social Foundations of Music and Dance in Tamil Nadu. Then 2001, I was asked to deliver a endowment lecture of Laila College. It is here, Music as History, the Tamil Nadu experience. Then whether music has the potential of functioning as an ideology, this I wrote for Parthasarathi Gupta volume. Then if a music composer is living in times, what are the social sentiments or this thing? So Maratha history from the lyrics of Tyagaraja, I gave it as a Mamadipudi Venkatrangaya lecture. History of music and dance during Vijayanagara Nayak phase, when we brought out a volume on my guru, Professor Dr. Mahalingam. Cultural production in pre-colonial South Indian town, Tanjavur, for the volume edited by Yogesh and this thing from this thing. Then I got an opportunity for an international conference, music as an index of civilization and culture in Beijing. So then some valedictory addresses and all that, role of performing arts in freedom struggle, etc. So 2010, I have come up to that. So historical or a historian's approach is justifiable because each discipline can approach music. I was convinced by this time. And then the general talks about interdisciplinarity, boundaries being breached, etc. All these things are being talked about. And our efforts to proceed from the material to construct history was not convincing. People were writing. People have been writing in South also. So then pan-Indian, whether Sanskrit, Margi, Desi, all debates in music has been going on. In today's talk, I think when Shagufta asked me 1 or 2 lines, how will you say about the today's lecture? I said, culture is a very broad field. India has a lot of cultural traditions, in which performing tradition is one. In performing tradition, music is another. Music tradition can be explained. The formation of that tradition can be explained by a historian. That is why I have given the title Formation of Music Tradition Tamil. Because when you come to Vijayanagara period, that Tamil tradition merges with the Telugu tradition. And it becomes a kind of a pan-South Indian culture under Vijayanagara. Because Vijayanagara was almost ruling most of the peninsula. Although there is a kind of a debate whether Kerala was actually under Vijayanagara or not. Velupillai's volume says, but very clearly Tiruvadi Rajyam is mentioned. Anyhow, that is the political and administrative history. I don't want to go. But it is enough for us to explain that Vijayanagar and 16th century gave the opportunity for the taking shape of Carnatic music. That can be very clearly explained. Then what was there earlier? Is it just that alone, or is there a dynamics of development? It is here now the recent literary studies tradition. Say, for example, Schulman's Tamil biography, or Sheldon Pollock has not written much on Tamil Nadu, but he has written more on Kannada and other areas, Sanskrit. So the Sanskrit Tamil interaction has to be kept in mind, and then see whether this can be explained. Can we find some way of historical explanation? So there, what I found was, I simply located the activity. But whether this will work for Pan India, whether it will work for epics, etc., see the kind of problems that people are facing. How do you give an authentic history of Telangana? See, we wrote a history of India. Nilakant Sastri wrote a history of South India. Satyanarayana wrote a history of Andhra and culture. Now, Telangana has become a state now. It is Telugu. Culture is the same, but how do you have a separate history of Telangana? Whether the Kakatiya past is more important or the Vijayanagara past is more important. What is the quantum of influence? It becomes very, very difficult, authentic, because we are asking the question authentic. So unless the political past is created, then the rest of the things cannot be written. So that is only a lead. So like that, I was looking for a lead. The lead here, even now music is an activity during December. It is the cultural capital of South India. People from abroad, they come. In fact, roughly about 6 years back, 16 years back, we took some statistics. The amount of economics and musical activity. So look at the volume of money flowing into Madras during 10th, 20th, 15th December to say 15th of January. It's throughout the year it is happening. The middle class has appropriated. Now we will do it. Maharajas were patronizing. Now it is the middle class surplus which is sustaining. These are all realities, social realities. We can, and then the foreign capital. I mean, the people who are gone from here, they are sustaining it abroad. You have a Cleveland festival, isn't it? So like that. So now this activity is the key. What is the kind of activity that you have in Sangam literature? Singing the praise of a pattern. Singing the praise of a pattern. So once you have pattern, associated with that is the political, kingship, etc. And the progress of research have all to be kept in mind, which you don't expect a person from music department to study moral kingship to ritual kingship. That's our job. And they are not interested in that. So in stage 1, I'm going to explain this in 3 stages. I'll just take about 20-25 minutes. What I mean by formation of tradition. I am putting it in the overall framework of literary tradition and literary patronage as a kind of a lead, along which you have to grade the other materials, bring it in. The cumulative effect. Earlier patronages persist with change. Who are the people who have given us the lead here? Ronald Inden has given us the lead. Yes, papers. David Schulman has written. Sheldon Pollock. Lately, of late, it is Whitney Cox who has written. The philological studies. We have to keep that also in mind. So, the Indology earlier, and then what progress has been made after that. That also has to be tracked. So, in stage 1, what happens from the point of view? Poetry at this stage is bardic. Whether it is north or south, you have Sutas and Magadas here. Poetry is bardic. The corpus, so-called Sangam literature, maintained through relationship of patrons and wandering poets. Generally, for all this, we use a very important authority, Kailasapati. People must have heard the name of heroic poetry of K. Kailasapati, 1968 on Thin Ice. Chapter 2 is entirely on singers and patrons from page 55 to 93. So what comes up is the patron-bard relationship is entirely dependent. Here, the bard is entirely dependent on the patron. It is this changing relationship through that I'm going to explain. At this stage, in a bardic poetry, the bard is entirely dependent on the patron for survival. How do you say that? Pathetic descriptions. The descriptions are all pathetic. But the other fellow who is giving the gift also is also a fool. It will appear foolhardy. The fellow is not able to eat twice a day. You present him with an elephant. you present him. These are the kinds of information that you will actually get. But what comes out? George L. Hart also has written Poets of the Tamil Anthologies in 1979. So the bard-minstrel relationship becomes central. The bard-minstrel relationship becomes central. So bardic patronage will have superlatives. But what we get in between are certain expressions. For example, Pan Kadan. So you have to study the Panas and the poets and then the patrons. Patrons, if you study, it is political history. Kadayadu Vallalhal, king, and all that. A lot of people have been studied. Poets, composition of the poets, caste, social composition, etc., are being studied. What is not being studied is the third one, that is the minstrels. So if I have studied, I have a paper on Panans. We get an expression called Pan Kadan. That is duty towards minstrels. So the ruler or the patron has certain obligations. The minstrel has certain obligations. The poet has certain obligations. Patron also has certain obligations. This you can easily make out. This man plays socially useful labor. I think I have discussed that in the rational and social. What is the nature? See, you can also ask the question, what is the nature of labor that this man puts in? He puts in socially useful labor. So, hero to be hero needs the bard, and the bard depends on patron. Readiness of hero to accept his duty and the bard to sing his praise. So unless you sing the praise, he is not a hero. So that is actually, then you have other expressions like in Tamil, there are two expressions. One is called puhal. That is fame, glory. Other one is called pali. Is the opposite of puhal. Bard had the monopoly of singing the praise of the patron. That's what comes out. That is the sensibility that we have to recognize. And sociologically, we get asymmetrical relationship between poet and bard, Panan, etc. All these things can be studied. Now, so far, we have not talked about the musical part. We are only zooming in. We are trying to reach the material. So this I will give you for reading. Sangeet Natak, my Nurul Hasan paper, you can read. Rational and Social Foundation, IAC 98, you can read. Panans of Sangam Age, I've just completed. It is coming in another collection. So now comes the question of music of the early Tamils. So from history, now we have traversed to the literature, and now we have come to the music. So here, it is Tolhapia. There it is Panini's grammar. How important is Panini for Sanskrit? Here, Tolkappiyam is important. So because you don't expect singing like today, it is a kind of praising the hero. You will get equivalents, Vannam, Pattu, these are the Tamil terms. There are 20 types which are mentioned. Fourfold classification, Pan, Yar, Swal. I mean, Mudar Porul, Karupurul, and all that. What is important is Vattapale, from which you can gauge the scale, and then measurement, matrices, etc., musical sounds and musical instruments, and importance of Kalitohai and Parivana. So you make sense out of the literature, and this is the way that we can recover the information. This is stage 1. I don't want to go into the technical details, but if necessary, I'll come back to that a little later. What kind of musical sense you make and all that, we can discuss it later. So this is how you zoom in. But if you want to hear, I will just briefly go through. But it is all very difficult to translate it in English at this stage. There are 4 types of puns. Then Perupoludhu, Sirumpoludhu, then the classification, then the landscape classification, technically Pannattigal, Varam, Vannangal, Yapu, Kalipa. So it is more on poetry and prosody. Gana Vritta. Here also in North also you have the Gana Vritta method and the Matra Vritta method. So the rhythm, all these things can be reconstructed from this. So it requires a sound knowledge of literature also. So now what is the second stage? And people who have been following studies on kingship, you will appreciate this much better. You know, Bertenstein or anyone who has been writing, when they write about kingship, they talk about changing kingship, nature of kingship. The kind of kingship recoverable from Sangam literature is heroic kingship, but from Bardic literature. That is recoverable from didactic is called moral kingship, Jain and Buddhist. Say, for example, what kind of kingship from Tirukkural? It is prescriptive and descriptive. Descriptive and prescriptive criteria you have to apply. Then when you come to Pallavas, it is ritual kingship. Then when you come to Cholas, it is sacral kingship. When you come to Vijayanagar, it is dharmic kingship. That is how people have explained kingship. What does this mean for this kind of a study? So the Sangam poet starts comparing now from a particular, towards the end, comparing the patron to God or several gods. This has got significance when you come to even medieval period. Why under Krishnadevaraya, which have very interesting coinage by Eaton. So I think I put that question for discussion. Somehow we did not get across. Hybrid theology, religious tolerance and all that we are talking about. Even with all the sectarian differences, there was religious tolerance. In the sense, hybrid theology, Eaton calls it as hybrid theology. Original founders, deity, Shiva. 15th century onwards, Vaishnavism is on the rise. People might know Krishnadevaraya visited Tirupati 7 times in his life. In fact, the entire society was on the move. Otherwise, where is the need for Chatram and Chavadi? He went to Srivilliputtur and then talked about Amukta Mallika. Isn't it? No, this kind of secularized culture, kind of interpretation has to come. There has been rationalization of thought, but there is no secularization of culture in India. That is because we did not have a proper socialist. So the comparison between poet and God, this is a literary convention. It is called Puvai Nilai. The deities mentioned are not active partners in the relationship between the poet and the Lord. But this situation changes between 6th and 7th centuries AD, and particularly with Nandivarman II of Pallava. So the rise of Bhakti and the Brahminic dominance is questioned by the contesting ideologies. Then the king has to say, I am Param Bhakta. I am both Shankar Bhakta and I am also Vishnu Bhakta. this is reflected in the Birudas also. We can give it, and you have to situate Freedom Hardy's work here, Viraha Bhakti, Schulman's King and Clown. These are the ones which actually explain. So I think the 6th, 7th century is a major shift. If you go strictly by even literature also. So what happens to our original idea? The patronage from heroes to kings to temples, it is now slowly shifting from singing the praise of patron. Now it is the singing the praise of God. But whether they are the same persons, they are different persons, it's very difficult to establish. But the activity, this thing, it definitely changes. The transformation in Tamil society and culture seems to reflect the breakdown of the ancient primordial units of social organization and the extension of the community both physically and socially. Here I am tempted to make a statement, may sound a little more controversial. What happens to Hindu identity here? If you apply Hindu identity, definitely the redefining at least excludes two people which was contesting. Jains and Buddhists are not included here, culturally, looking at culturally. The boundaries of collective identity get redefined largely in relation to Bhakti gods and their saints, with the exclusion of Jain and Buddhist community. A new form of kingship came into being. Schulman also discusses it in King and Clown and Ritual. And then you also find another major shift. The shift from Dana to Brahmanas. Brahmadeyas to be taken into account here. But what becomes of the poet? That is the question. The rest of the things, processes, we know as students of history. The poet becomes the kingmaker. It is here I want to make this statement. He is a dealer in images of authority and propriety and plays an increasingly powerful role. Who brought this to our notice first? Nicholas Dirks. Political authority and structural change. Then Thirumurhatrupadai as a genre to Bhakti poets guide devotees not to the patron but to God. You know, that is a very clear shift, that now bypassing the patron becomes the norm. That is what I wanted to point out. So now Nammalvar, Sundarar, opposition to temple and king. Now what happens is, instead of a submissive this thing, he now becomes a friend of God. Particularly if you take Sundarar, one of the 4 Samayacharyas, a friend can criticize God. You are getting that kind of literature. So now what happens actually, so far it was complaints. Now it becomes a shopping list. That will be bad. What you are doing is wrong. Those kinds of things. We have so many examples. It is here that Champak Lakshmi's paper I want to refer. Padiham Paduvar. Who are the people who are singing the praise of God? She has a paper, the religious tradition. So I will give you a reading to understand this phase, because it will be very difficult to discuss in a 1-hour presentation. So what I would paraphrase this shift from complaint to shopping list. Poets, human patrons to the god or to the temple, within this framework is a perpetuation and extension of earlier customs of poet-patron relationship. I want to see a continuity here. Concomitant emergence of poetry abusing and deriding the old pattern of interdependence between human patrons and poets. So during this period, 2 evidences I have selected. One, I have sent it a Kudmiyamalai inscription, Silappatikaram. These are the 2 texts, 2 major evidences which are available. So for this phase, the Pallava, Pandya, Chola, Bhakti, Champak Lakshmi's Padiham Paduvar. First she wrote it in Studies in History, Then there is a thesis, Oduar tradition in music department. It's a good thesis. I don't know why it has not been published. It was submitted in 1999. Then the Pan Raga, this thing that the Tamil people took it up, hymns of the Tamil saints. Then my father also has, and I have also summarized all that, and I have published it, Historical Dimensions of Tevara Music in Sangeet Natak in 2011. Again, this was another endowment lecture. So I have done that. So now I will just demonstrate. Suppose you take a text like Silappatikaram. What kind of research has been conducted? You know that the person who recovered it was U.V. Swaminathan. All of us know. I mean, it was recovered from manuscripts and all. Then V. Ramachandra Dikshidhar in 1939 wrote extensively. And one problem with this is, like us, the musicians do not make a distinction between the text and commentary. What is written in 11th century also goes back, as even in Vijayanagar it happened. Philip Wagner's Tidings of the King, it is actually one foot in Vijayanagara court, the other foot in Nayak court. It is 17th century. Because there is information on Vijayanagar, people treated it as a contemporary source. Now, with improvement in techniques of analysis, this is changing. The explanations and context. Arangetrukade. On that, Padma Subramaniam wrote Karanas. So dance. Music, S. Ramanathan. Natyasastra. So now comes the question, whether it is the Sanskrit influence on Tamil or Tamil, the controversy will always be Natyasastra influence on Silappatikaram. Whether Arangetrukade is the Tamil version of Natyasastra, that the debate is on. Rasas and Bhavas. And technical terms have been analyzed by Mr. Ramanathan. So chanting only, recitation, and no singing. Singing means it is recitation. Musician, what is important here is ascendancy of dance and a subordinate role of the music. You can't see music as a separate this thing. It is only part of that. Then the most other, I will come back to that a little later, because you have to take the 11th century Manasa Ullasa, the neighboring Chalukya territory, also into consideration. So we have all this information. 11 dances, Vedic traditions, chanting, Durga mantra, Tamil stotras, then instrument musicians, Adal Asan, Isai Asirian, all these things are actually mentioned even in Silappatikaram. You have lot of material. We have to make sense of it. Of course, chronologically, it becomes difficult for us to determine that difficulty. Only a historian is conscious about it, others are not. Then musical forms, there is a difference. In North, you have the Prabandha. Here you have the Pattu, Ahanataka, because the Tamil tradition is different. Ahanataka, Puranataka, Deva Bani, Sendurai. It is not Kanda Prabandhas. Then quality of music. 8 kinds of tonal expression, because the instruments are being used. It is called Pannal. Parivattanai, Arayal, Thaivaral, Selavu, Vilayattu, Kayyur, Kurumboku. You have to be a Tamil scholar to master these things. So you have a lot of material. So this phase is also very, very important. Now you reach the Chola contemporary. That's the third stage that I am talking about. Now what I have done, I have collected all the references. So now for the first time, instead of talking in the air, I will say, this is the song. I mean, I did a little bit of Attarelli Saab here. Let me see whether it means this or that. We must have the 2 lines there. So I have put it. Now that will be an appendix. So it will be useful to future researchers. So that's what in last 10 years I have done. So the third stage is the king needs his poets. The court poets at least need the king's support. And yet a rival center has emerged, the temple, with its own resources for patronage. Many of them, of course, of royal origin. With a poetic ideology that is largely hostile to the traditional heroic or courtly panegyric. Now the king needs the authority of the temple deity and later servants in order to maintain his own tenuous claims. Older type of poetic praise becomes subordinated to a new end. You are now getting Kamban. What he says, he is not talking about Ramayana. The title of his work is Ram Avatar. The king wants to be Rama himself. I am an incarnation of Rama. I am the ideal king. That is what Eaton also has indicated in that hybrid theology I was referring. Virupaksha for the core territory, Tirupati Vishnu for conquered Tamil Nadu. To satisfy the coastal districts, it is Krishna, Balakrishna. And then part of Deccan, it is Pandarinada Purandara Vittala. So he has made a very oblique reference to what is called a hybrid theology. So the political culture has taken shape. It is here that you can also read Dawood Ali's courtly culture and political life in early medieval India about the Chalukyan court, Manasa Ullasa. So you may have information about music, but not necessarily the way musician wants it. That is the problem. So I would like to wind up by saying, I don't want to go into Sheldon Pollock's treatment of that. I want to say that this is stage 3, and stage 4 will be decline of Cholas. Satirical poets occupy for some time, but when you come to Nayaks, very important change takes place. What is that? Feed as many people as possible. That will also give you punya. Dig a canal. That is equal to performing 100 Ashwamedh. And there is a satirical work called Annadana Mahanatakamu. Myself and Kesavan, we saw it in Tanjore. No, by taking this one activity, linking it up with the literary tradition, changing nature of kingship, and then people who participated in music, up to that, a historian can do. After that, it is the musician. So on another occasion, I will come from music to history. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Excellent, sir. I mean, very exhaustive treatment, starting from the very start of the topic. I mean, introducing the topic and then going on into the nuances of music as you have researched into the field. It was an excellent presentation. There is no doubt about it. I hope, sir, that you would agree to take a few questions.
Welcome, welcome.
So let us have the first question. Ali Haider. Sir, can you please shed some light on music during the era of Carnatic Nawabs?
Yeah, why not? You see, it is very difficult to separate Karnataka Nawab's rule as far as music is concerned. But, you know, if you have been following South Indian history, I think I explained elsewhere also. For example, Satish Saab. If you take Satish Saab's classic book, Medieval India, the first one, I'm giving this because, you know, the difficulties in comprehending the information and the kind of explanations to be offered. So Satish Saab treats Vijayanagar in part 1 under Sultanate. But the original purpose is up to 1526 and after, isn't it? But Vijayanagar goes up to 1566. That chapter 10 only will go up to 1565. A descriptive account is okay. But further fine-tuning happened in these two things happened, you know, that the Tamil tradition is up to Cholas. Of course, there was influence of Sanskrit. We have to be clear about which is Tamil and which is Margi and which is Desi in musical language. Which is Margi and which is Desi. But when it comes to Vijayanagara period, then there are two formations, which anyone, I thought I will explain it with Nobru Karashima. 13, some people treat it with 1350 to 1550. You must have, I mean, you are all familiar, medievalists are all familiar. But when I wrote on music, I always prefer to combine Vijayanagara and Nayak together. That is, you stretch it by another 100 years. So 1350 to 1650. But that tradition actually took shape under Marathas with the Maratha rulers. Because if you actually analyze the forms, say, I'll give you an example. I didn't go into that, but I think before answering either Sahab, I want to explain. See, you have to go into compositions and occasions. You have to create a context. There is a wide variety of worldly compositions. Prapanda Laukika, it is called. Now I will go a little technical for answering the question. Or to be sung at feasts and festivals. Say, for example, if it's a Katha, Satpadi, Tripadi, frustrated love, Davala, Apabramsa at weddings, Mangala at festivals, Charya, etc. Then Shaki, Ovi, Dandi, all these go into the Harikatha format. So, at different stages, this symbiosis is taking place. So, you have to stretch it up to 1750, which also will include the Nawabs of Carnatic. That is, when you take it from 1350 to 1750, then it makes sense for the actual crystallization of the Carnatic this thing. Then you have the what do you call Trinity, Tyagaraja, Muthuswami Dikshidhar. This is what myself and my father, when we did that book on Carnatic music and the Tamils, I'm now answering Alisa. Age of Sangam, age of Salapadigaram, age of Pallavas, up to Cholas, we have discussed. Then we made a distinction between classical evidence and musical evidence. How to use the classical evidence and how to use the this thing. 15th, 16th century onwards, Devaram to Tirupugar is a transition. Tirupugar to the first treatise. It's called Swaramela Kalanidhi, 1400 to 1500. And Swaramela Kalanidhi to Sadrudandi Prakashika. So, as far as music is concerned, we have not come across any patronage kind of a thing from Tuzuki Walajagi. I mean, that's one source I have seen, because I also did something on 18th century and I did some archival work also. The patronage to that, it is very difficult. I have not come across. So it is better to go by the information that is available. But directly, I have not come across any evidence of patronage of music on the rule of Nawab Farkad. Maybe I have to look for it.
Right, sir. There's another question by Barnali Adhikari. Could you illuminate us about Tamil Shiv saint Shiva Prakash, who translated early Kannada works into Tamil?
Yes. Offhand, I can't immediately, but yes, that Kannada, Tamil, for example, for this, you have to understand, that's what I said, the polemics in, nowadays, the trend is, I'm giving another information to you. I also gave a lecture about 1 week ago. 15th century, you are having Vishnu becoming important, as I mentioned during the course of the talk. Out of the Vishnu form, only Ram and Krishna are popular. Other forms, because this incarnation is very, very important. A person who comes from a lowly background, he wants to be an ideal king. Who could be the ideal king here? It is only Rama. So that is why Kamban also wrote Rama Avataram, incarnation. It is applicable to Vijayanagar as well. So what happened under Vijayanagar? there was Advaita Vedanta, there were Vaishnavas, there were also Dvaitas. The king patronized all three. So the Vyasaraya, who is the guru of Purandaradasa, he was in the court of Vijayanagar, got lot of grants. And the Vyasaraya Mutt moved. They have established everywhere. So Kannada settlements in Tamil Nadu is very, very common. Kannada settlements in Andhra is very, very common. And it is all the grant from Vijayanagara period. So that is why it all consolidated. The musical forms consolidated. So translation from here to there is there. But offhand, I'm not able to give any direct reference at the moment.
Thank you, sir. Let us have the next question. I think the next one is by Lakshmikant Mishra. It is apparently clear that you are fabulous both in theory and practice, and I agree with Lakshmikantji. You are a well-read scholar, that too we agree. Humbly, I want to know how the Karnataka music contributed to develop a Sanskrit cosmopolis in South India, and then how is Tamil music different from Karnataka music? Music received patronage of ruling class from pre-Christian centuries. We have sculptural representations also. You are absolutely wonderful.
See, this Sanskrit cosmopolis business of Sheldon Pollack, it is useful in understanding text. It is useful in understanding text. So I will answer that first. And in fact, he has a chapter on Kannada tradition in that popular book, Language of Gods. And 1131 Someswara III, the Kalyana Chalukya, probably a court scholar attributed to the king himself. You know, you will have references like, I didn't go into details. So the way that you look at history material, we should not look at it cultural representations, etc. So for understanding instruments, you can identify. Like for understanding karanas or poses, as Padma Subramaniam did, we can identify. But each form requires a lot of research. Say, for example, one common term that you get between Chalukyas and Chola is Vinoda. Vinoda. Because the fourth section of I referred to Manasollasa. Now I come back to Manasollasa. So the 5 principal sections are, this is 12th century, Rajya Prapti Karana, Rajyati Karana, that is, without going into technical, acquisition of political power, consolidation of power, physical enjoyment of power, entertainments of intellectual delight, pleasures of sport. So these are the sections. These are the sections. So physical enjoyment of power, entertainments of intellectual delight, it will come. 4th section, Kavya, comes in Shastra Vinoda, entertainment of learned discourse, and Katha Vinoda, entertainment of storytelling. Description of Sabha, cultural assembly, participants and spectators of royal culture. There you have the classification. You have reciters. They are called Patakas, singers, Gayakas, epic reciters. See, again, epic reciters, there is a further classification. The Sutas that you get in Mahabharata and Ramayana, Suta Magadha, they are there. Once again, they come. And genealogists, they are also there. So the language of the text, some elements of storytelling, etc., Gita, Vinoda, melody, rhythm, etc., is generally taken. When it comes to Tamil answer, suppose I take one inscription, which as a matter of illustration, to say that dance went up. The big temple 400 Devadasis as a part of centralization. This also happened. People who have read South Indian history, they must be knowing, especially volume 2, I think inscription 66, if I can recall the number. 400 people. So it is not only centralization of land revenue, it is not only attempted centralization of nadus. Different cultic centers, whatever was practiced as so-called dance art, all of them were transferred and they were given a particular place to live, and dance became a service, ritual service. So if you see the hierarchy, 400, they are called Adal Mahalir, dance use. Devadasis. Sanjukta Panigrahi made a statement, it became a very controversial one. She wanted to be a Devadasi. Art for art's sake. We have to understand that in the context. I only want to dance for me and for the God. Dance for dance. So Adal Mahalir, 400. Then Nattuva Asangal. I am actually repeating the inscriptional terms. I can give you the number also. 400 Adal Mahalir, 12 Nattuva Asans, 5 Gana Padigal, 3 Vangiya Mesepor, 2 Udukkai Vasipor, 3 Virnai Vasipor, 3 Aryam Paduvar, 4 Tamil Paduvar. So what is this Aryam Paduvar and Tamil Paduvar? Sanskrit tradition and Tamil tradition. So it became a kind of a difficult thing for balancing the sectarian divisions here also. So anyone who has read Ramanuja and particularly Paul Younger's book on Paul Younger's article on Adhyayanotsava festival. So the ritual space, there was contest for ritual space. So the primacy, that is what Ramanuja did. On this occasion, primacy is to this. On this occasion, primacy is to the Tamil tradition. They have to balance the tradition. It is not entirely the Sanskrit polis that he is talking about. Tamil Paduvar 4. Kotti Mattala Mesepur. Muttare Sangha Uduvar. It is at one level. One inscription I have given. Grants are given as Nirtha Kani. Kani, Nirtha Kani. Nattuva Kani. Then Iraili, Adalum, see, these are Gita Vinoda Vadanadu. Even the Vadanadus were named after Gita Vinoda and Nitya Vinoda Vadanadu. So the importance of dance is clearly attested. But which one dominated, it is very difficult to say. We have to see the kind of service, the kind of forms that requires further research, and one has to have some clarity. But one thing can be really said is dance was on the ascendant, and music became on its own under Vijayanagara. This statement from my studies I can very clearly make.
Professor Rezavi, you're on mute.
No, I'm saying there's a question a continuation by Lakshmikant Mishra. He asks, it is interesting to learn that the vernacular tracts have influenced Sanskrit cosmopolitanism. Would you kindly elaborate on that?
Yeah, I understand the question. It is like asking, which requires further research. We are always talking about expansion of Indian culture into Southeast Asia, but we are not able to explain the reverse. So how much Sanskrit has given to, say, like the controversy on Ikta. I think Wagner has an article. Ikta induced Amaram, or Amaram was there even before introduction of Ikta. And these are things it is very difficult to answer. But that is why the Indian culture, it is a kind of a mix. There must have been give and take, and we are not, here I am tempted to repeat my father's statement, because whatever I am working now, it is his continuation. He always used to say, once the river joins the sea, you cannot analyze the brine. It has already become a mosaic. It's very difficult to say. Yes, there is give and take on both sides. No doubt about it. One has to work.
Damini Yadav, who is a student of MA at Aligarh, she asks, Sir, does the early music shed any light on the lives of common people?
Entirely on common people, including the one. So I did not give the passages because otherwise they'll be lost. See, when I say Panan, Tudiyan, Parayan, they all did socially useful labor. They did conflict resolution even between common people also. It was an egalitarian society. Definitely, we have a lot of instances.
Shagufta, any other questions? Or
No, sir, there are no questions, but I'm very thankful for this beautiful talk. I mean, we often talk about the need to have broad-based study of history. And, like, of course, we keep talking about it, that it has to be implemented, and then the study of history. I mean, sadly, it's just moved along the predictable lines all these years. However, in a very heartening sort of development, the academic study of South India has in the recent years been accompanied by a slew of well-researched, albeit popular works of history. So there are popular works by people such as Charles Allen and Manu Pillai, Richard Eaton, and so it's no longer that the art and culture of the Deccan and the far south has seen renewed interest. So it's no longer just, when I was a graduate student, it's no longer just about our reliance on Neelakant Shastri. So it's moved well past that. That's very heartening, and we get to hear it and read about it so often. And if I may say so, sir, I really wish when I was studying South India, I had you as my professor, because the way you explained it, it was so it was so
No.
interesting and engaging.
My student only taught you. Malay must have taught you.
That's actually correct. That's so correct. Yes, he did teach me.
Shagufta,
But I taught him. I taught him only Buttonstein and Karashima. This part, unfortunately, there were no takers. Only I was doing. Now you have given me an opportunity to explain. See, one thing I want to make it very clear, whether it is see, I always felt I had a problem. In the sense, the generalization at the pan-Indian level and the regional level, the familiarity with the sources is a major problem. You can't expect every teacher. For example, if you want to work on Vijayanagar or see, for example, Bamini or Adil Shahis, how many theses are there? I managed to produce one. Elite's ideology and culture. In this thing, I motivated somebody. She went and got translated from Marathi professor, this and that. But we want to do a good job, but it's very difficult.
Sir, there is one more question to you by Zainab Naqvi. Thanks for the interesting lecture, Professor Subramaniam. When studying music in relation with history, can it be reflective of the social classes linked to it, like that of performing artists, dancing women, etc., and their social and economic relations with the art?
Yes, it is possible. Earlier, see, the question of folk music and all that, which we try to do now. But I gave you this example of Manasa Ullasa, I think, a little before, because on these occasions, the forms are available, but it is very difficult to bring back how it was sung and all that. It's very difficult. But 16th, 17th century onwards, it is possible. It is possible. Say, for example, Madras, if you watch the Tamil movies, etc., you find this Ghana part, then songs of the fishermen, and all have now become popular. But historically, bringing it, through archives or that may be difficult. But they have survived. They are living traditions. That can be identified, at least from 17th century onwards. It is possible.
Well, sir, I mean, thank you for answering Zainab's question, because I also had a very similar question to ask you. And that was, is there any social information on social status as far as the musicians are concerned? I mean, for example, as far as you know, I'm no expert of Tamil Nadu or of music or the topic which you are discussing today. But while I was working on the professional classes under the Mughals, I found that, for example, people like the architects, they are always praised but never named. But contrary to that, there is a list of musicians and list of painters which is included in the official text, like Ain Akbari, etc., etc. So, do we find, I mean, reflecting their social status within the Mughal society? So, is there any type of information contained there? That is my query number one. I hope that you will take them together, or you may take them separately as well.
Maybe. No, okay. You can put the second question also.
Well, secondly, I would be very interested to know whether there was any influence of Islam, which by this time was knocking at the doors, on Tamil music traditions. I mean, we know that there has been an entry of the Muslim mercantile classes along with their traditions in the Coromandel coast. We also know that by 8th century, they have entered the North India. We know that under the Palas, they have settlements. So is there any type of, their influence which we find on Tamil music? This is my query number two. Thirdly, sir, and that is my last, any information, because I would also be interested. I mean, for example, the works of Catherine Scofield, or for that matter, there is another work which has been done as far as the 16th, 17th century is concerned, on the musical instruments, as far as North India is concerned. I mean, there is a work, I'm forgetting the name of the author who's quite famous. I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name, who tries to show that when these musical instruments enter into the country, say under the Mughals, from percussion instruments, they turn into something else. I mean, do we find such type of changes taking place as far as your place is concerned, the Tamil region? Any influence of this, and what type of instruments are being used to create the Tamil music? These are three of my questions. Very basic questions. I am sorry, sir. I am no expert of music, and that is why. But let me assure you that your lecture has been a learning experience for me.
You see, we are working with, in this case, literature as the base, because we are lucky. Tamil Nadu is lucky when compared to other regions, that there is a continuous availability of Tamil literature right from Sangam age without break. We are getting. And the very explanation of music is with reference to landscapes right from the beginning. I mentioned about Kailasapati's, that coastal littoral, and then the mountainous region, then this thing, even the instruments are linked to that this is the instrument of this. So to make it a scale or the expression, etc., it has to be based on the instruments only. So then you make that, you collect a lot of information, and when we collate all of them, what I find is, even up to the formation period, which I have scanned almost everything, the kind of instruments that we are talking in Mughal India, there is no place at all. Then comes the musicological treatises. There maybe techniques we have to, I'm still not a master on whether there is an influence of Hindustani music on that. But when we come to Muthuswami Dikshidhar, 18th century, ragas mein definitely there is an influence of Hindustani, not on instruments. That is number one. But the very relationship, asymmetric, and this thing that I was talking about, is on the status of singers only. And I will give you the example of Devadasis. What is the key is patronage. So patterns of patronage have changed. So obviously, the status of Devadasi singing the praise of God would not have been the same as the status of Devadasi in the court, which is the change under Vijayanagar when say, I am the God, I am the incarnation of God. So she starts dancing in the court. So the kind of music or the kind of forms produced, they are not to be compared to that. Then there is a fall. Then further, she has to go to the theater. When British come, so the status cannot be the same from temple to court, from court to theater, from theater to street. But whether you will, and all people associated with that, their status was not up to the mark. That is one thing for sure. But yes, we can. And since you gave me an opportunity, I want to give a kind of opening which Irfan Saab has given. This is the only reference in this NBT book which I mentioned. I deliberately took it for that. This page 244. Dancing seemed at its courtly levels to be the exclusive preserve of women, designated lobbies and conchants, etc. These women generally belonged to particular castes and communities, and at higher levels received much training. Islam Khan Fatehpuri, a noble of Jahangir, employed a large number of such men, but we lack details about their art. Bonnie C. Wade, Imaging. It is in that context he has brought in that book. So when it comes to question, mentioning the people is there. It is known as a service to the God. But what is the form? What even for Purandaradasa, whether those tunes we are singing now, we can't say, because each one has handled it. That is the problem of music. But the songs have survived. But from 17th, 18th century onwards, we have preserved. But prior to that, it becomes very, very difficult to say. But the status of the artist was not much to be talked about. But in this context, I think Akbar was very good at Nagada, and he composed about 230 Khwarizmian tunes. And instruments, when you are talking about, Marathas imported, they brought from Messrs. Arbuthnot and Company. Because in the 1800, for Sarfoj's marriage, all these was brought. And then when you enter the palace, you will find on one side, you will find the Ayudha Sala, and on the other side, you will find the musical instruments. So war dance, war drum, all these things were common. I think people should take it up seriously, try to cull out information and try to make sense of it. See, it's not possible for one person. I am trying to do it in my own way.
So I'm, just before we conclude your lecture, just one more thing, sir. I'm sorry I'm being inquisitive, although almost 2 hours have passed by. But, what I got from your lecture is that possibly the music was, as to be expected, only related to religion. And the secular music tradition had possibly not developed to that extent as one can expect in the modern period of times. Sir, you rightly referred to Ghuniyatul Munya, which actually is so far considered to be the earliest text which was composed in Persian. It was edited by Shahab Sarmadi.
Yes.
But then under Aurangzeb, there were a number of other texts which were also, composed. Some of them were actually translations of the earlier non-Persian texts, for example, Rag Darpan.
No, yeah.
But then I'm forgetting the name, whether it is Tahqiqul Hind or I'm forgetting the actual name of the book.
Mm-hmm.
It was also composed under Akbar, under Aurangzeb. where there is an account of the musical notes, tals, rags, which have been given. Naturally, I am much more, uh, um, you know, knowing about the north than in the south. Thank you for adding to our knowledge. And simply, it was a fascinating lecture, and you threw light on almost all aspects of music. And we are extremely thankful to you, sir. Now, as far as our audience is concerned, let me announce that from the next week, we would be starting our lectures an hour late. We would start at 8 o'clock instead of 7. So we will be having lectures from 8 p.m. IST. That is announcement number one. Secondly, that I have also to announce that Asha and Ganga Jamni are, hoping to ring in the Women's Day on 8th of March with a special program. We are not going to announce the actual program just now. We are still in a planning stage, but hopefully on the Women's Day itself, on 8th of March, from 8 p.m. in the evening, we would be having a special session on Women's Day. So I announce from here that although we would be announcing it on social media, the exact theme and the speakers for that, but for all those who listen in, tune in to YouTube or are listening in to the Facebook this coverage, please make it a point to also not only attend Fridays and Sundays, but also be there on 8th of March to celebrate the Women's Day. Thank you once again, Professor Dr. T.K. Venkata Subramaniam ji. It's been a real pleasure to listen to you after such a long time. I mean, in fact, let me just conclude by saying that we started our MA classes by listening to you. You know, sir, when we were doing our MA, you were a very frequent visitor to Aligarh. And in fact, I heard your lecture on the Pal, Pratihars, and the eighth developments of the 8th century. At that time, we did not know that you were also working on music. But on your subsequent visits, you revealed that aspect of yours, and we started reading on that as well. Thank you very much, sir, for inspiring our generation and the generation which is now coming up and trying to study history. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.